People think saving a life is glorious. It's not. It tastes like copper, stale coffee, and sheer, blind panic. When Tom pressed his mouth to the icy lips of the most ruthless CEO in Houston, he wasn't thinking about romance. He was thinking about the crunch of ribs under his palms and the ambulance that was taking too long. He breathed life into a woman who owned half the city. The security cameras caught it. The internet called it a kiss. Everything fell apart. The mop bucket squeaked. It was a high, irritating pitch that cut through the dead silence of the 32nd floor. Tom shifted his grip on the heavy wooden handle and pushed. Left. Right. Figure 8. The industrial floor cleaner smelled like synthetic lemons and bleach. It burned the back of his throat, but after 3 years on the graveyard shift at Vanguard Financial, Tom barely noticed. He checked his watch. 2:14 a.m. 4 hours left. 4 hours until he could trade the agonizing ache in his lower back for the cramped driver's seat of his Honda Civic. 4 hours until he could make it back to the tiny 2-bedroom apartment in Rogers Park before his daughter, Lily, woke up for school. Tom leaned against the handle, staring out the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Houston sprawled below him, a grid of amber streetlights and pulsing red taillights. Down there, people were sleeping. Up here, Tom was erasing the scuff marks of the city's elite. He was 34, but he felt 50. His knuckles were permanently dry, mapped with tiny white cracks from the chemicals. He wasn't a man. He was a utility. A ghost in a gray jumpsuit who emptied trash cans filled with half-eaten $20 salads and shredded documents worth more than he would earn in a lifetime. His phone buzzed in his chest pocket. He pulled it out with a damp, gloved hand. A text from Mrs. Higgins, his elderly neighbor who watched Lily at night. She coughed a bit around midnight, gave her the inhaler. Sleeping now, Tom closed his eyes. The tight knot in his stomach, the one that lived there permanently, pulled a fraction tighter. The albuterol inhaler was nearly empty. Refills were $80 with his bare-bones company insurance. He mentally tallied his bank account, $200 to his name. Rent was due in 4 days. Groceries. Gas. The math didn't work. The math never worked. He shoved the phone back into his pocket and grabbed the mop. Harder this time, he scrubbed a stubborn coffee stain near the edge of a mahogany desk. He didn't have time to be tired. Tired was a luxury. His radio crackled at his hip. Hodges. Tom unclipped the heavy Motorola unit. Yeah, Frank, go ahead. Got a spill on 50, Executive Suites. Somebody dropped a bottle of wine or some shit. Get up there. Tom frowned. 50? That's the CEO's floor. Nobody is supposed to be up there past midnight. Well, somebody is, Frank's voice crackled through the static. And she's pissed. It's Kensington. I just saw her keycard swipe an hour ago. Get a move on before she fires us both. Camille Kensington. The name alone made the temperature in the building drop. Tom had never seen her in person, but he had cleaned up the aftermath of her rage. Shattered glass in conference rooms, whiteboards violently erased. She had inherited Vanguard Financial from her father 5 years ago and systematically gutted the board of directors. The press called her a visionary. The employees called her a sociopath. Copy that, Tom said. He wheeled his cart toward the service elevator. The air inside the metal box was stale. As the numbers ticked upward, Tom stared at his reflection in the polished steel doors. Dark bags hung under his brown eyes. His jaw was covered in 2 days of rough stubble. He looked exactly like what he was, a man barely treading water. The elevator chimed. Floor 50. The doors slid open, and the smell of cheap lemon bleach was instantly replaced by the scent of ozone, expensive leather, and silence. Thick, plush carpet swallowed the sound of his work boots. The lighting here was soft, recessed, and warm. Art that cost more than houses hung on the walls. Tom pushed his cart down the hallway. The executive suite was at the far end behind a set of heavy, frosted glass doors. A sliver of light leaked from underneath. He knocked once, softly. No answer. He knocked again, a little harder. "Custodial," he called out. His voice felt too loud, too rough for the pristine hallway. Still nothing. Tom turned the handle. It was unlocked. He pushed the door open. "Miss Kensington? Frank said there was a—" The words died in his throat. The office was massive, flanked by windows overlooking Lake Michigan. But Tom wasn't looking at the view. A heavy crystal tumbler lay shattered on the floor, a pool of amber liquid soaking into the white Persian rug. And 3 feet away, behind a desk the size of a dining table, a woman was on her knees. She was clawing at her own throat. Tom froze for a fraction of a second. The cynical part of his brain, the part ground down by years of being invisible, told him to back away. "Call security. Don't touch the billionaire. Liability. Risk." Then she made a sound, a high, thin, whistling gasp. Tom didn't think. He ran. He slid to his knees beside her, the wet mop forgotten in the hallway. Camille Kensington was smaller than he expected. Her tailored navy blazer was rumpled, her silk blouse torn at the collar where her perfectly manicured nails had desperately ripped it open. Her face was flushed a dark, terrifying purple. Her lips were swelling, turning a pale, sickly blue. Hey, look at me," Tom said, his voice dropping into the calm, authoritative register he used when Lily woke up from a nightmare. Camille's eyes, a piercing, terrifying ice blue, locked onto his. They were wide, unblinking, filled with absolute terror. Anaphylaxis, Tom thought. He'd seen it once before. A kid at Lily's school had eaten a peanut. This was exactly the same. The sudden, violent shutting down of the body. "Do you have an EpiPen?" Tom demanded. He grabbed her shoulders. She was trembling violently. "Medicine, where is it?" She couldn't speak. The whistling sound from her throat grew fainter. Air wasn't moving. She managed a jerky, uncoordinated wave toward her leather purse spilled on the floor. Tom lunged for it. He dumped the contents onto the carpet. Lipstick, a platinum card, a mess of receipts, and there, a yellow plastic tube. He snatched it up, pulled the blue safety cap off, and gripped her thigh. "This is going to hurt." He jammed the orange tip into her outer thigh. A loud click echoed in the silent office. He held it there. 1, 2, 3. Nothing happened. Camille's eyes rolled back. Her body went slack, collapsing entirely against Tom's chest. No, Tom muttered, tossing the spent pen aside. He laid her flat on the carpet. "Come on. Breathe." He checked her pulse. It was racing, a frantic, thready flutter against her neck. But her chest wasn't rising. Her airway was completely clamped shut. The epinephrine wasn't working fast enough, or the dose was too old, or she had waited too long to use it. She was suffocating. Tom grabbed his radio. "Frank, call 911, floor 50. We have a medical emergency. She's not breathing. Now!" He threw the radio to the side. He tilted her head back, lifting her chin to open the airway. He pinched her nose. He didn't think about who she was. He didn't think about the millions of dollars in her bank account or the thousands of people she employed. She was just a body shutting down. He took a deep breath, sealed his mouth over hers, and blew. Resistance. It was like blowing into a brick wall. Her throat was swollen shut. Tom pulled back, gasping. He repositioned her head. "Push harder," he told himself. Force the air past the swelling. He sealed his lips over hers again. He pushed the air from his lungs with brutal force. Her chest rose, just a fraction. He pulled away, inhaled sharply, and came down again. Breathe. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't a kiss. It was violent, desperate mechanics. Blood from her cracked lips smeared against his mouth. He tasted the bitter, metallic tang of whatever she had eaten, mixed with copper and adrenaline. In the corners of the ceiling, a small black dome, the executive security camera, panned silently downward, its red light blinking. Tom pushed another breath into her. Then he started chest compressions. 30 pushes. 2 breaths. "Stay here," Tom grunted, the sweat dripping from his forehead onto her pale cheek. "Don't you die on my shift. Come on." He came down for another breath. As his mouth sealed over hers, Camille's body convulsed. Her eyes snapped open. The epinephrine finally hit her system like a freight train. She gasped. A massive, ragged, tearing sound. Her arms flailed out in blind panic, her fingers catching the collar of Tom's gray jumpsuit. She pulled him down as she arched upward, coughing violently, dragging air into her starved lungs. For a split second, they were tangled together on the floor. Her hands gripped his collar, pulling him tight against her, their faces inches apart, chests heaving. Then the elevator chimed. Footsteps pounded down the hallway. "Over here!" Frank's voice yelled, followed by the heavy boots of paramedics. Tom instantly scrambled backward, crab-walking away from her. He bumped into the heavy mahogany desk and stayed there, chest heaving, wiping the blood and saliva from his mouth with the back of his dirty glove. The EMTs swarmed the room. They shoved past him without a glance, dropping heavy bags of gear. "BP is dropping! Let's get a line in!" a medic shouted. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Camille was wheezing, coughing violently, but she was breathing. Through the forest of blue EMT uniforms, her ice-blue eyes found Tom. She stared at him. She didn't blink. Her hands were still curled into fists. "Clear the way, buddy," a second medic said, elbowing Tom aside as they loaded her onto a collapsible stretcher. Tom stood up. His knees shook. He watched as they wheeled the most powerful woman in Houston out of her office, the sirens already wailing down on the street level. The room was suddenly empty. The spilled wine soaked into the rug. The empty EpiPen lay discarded near a shattered crystal glass. Frank stood in the doorway, pale and sweating. "Jesus Christ, Hodges, what happened?" Tom looked at his hands. They were trembling. "She choked, I think." "You think?" Frank rubbed his face. "Look at this mess. Clean it up. Management is going to have our heads." Tom didn't argue. He picked up his mop bucket. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt sick. He scrubbed the wine out of the rug, threw away the shattered glass, and wiped the blood off the hardwood floor. He finished his shift. He clocked out at 6 a.m. He drove home in silence. The key stuck in the lock. It always did. Tom had to jiggle it left, pull it out a fraction of an inch, and twist hard. The door clicked open. The apartment smelled like old radiator heat and the cheap lavender soap Mrs. Higgins liked to use. The old woman was asleep on the lumpy sofa, a knitting magazine resting on her chest. Tom touched her shoulder gently. "Mrs. Higgins, I'm back." She snorted, blinking awake. "Oh, Thomas, good morning." She gathered her things slowly. "Lily slept fine after the inhaler. Just a little wheeze. Make sure she drinks warm water." "Thank you," Tom said, pressing 2 $20 bills into her hand. It physically hurt to part with the cash, but he couldn't afford to lose her. "See you tomorrow." After she left, Tom stood in the quiet living room. The adrenaline from the night before had completely burned off, leaving behind a hollow, aching exhaustion. His ribs hurt. His jaw felt tight. He walked into the tiny bathroom and stared at the mirror. There was a faint smear of dried blood at the corner of his mouth. Camille Kensington's blood. He turned on the tap and scrubbed his face until the skin was raw. He didn't want to think about the 50th floor. He didn't want to think about the cold, terrifying weight of a dying woman in his arms. He just needed to make oatmeal. "Dad?" Tom turned off the water. Lily stood in the doorway. She was 7, wearing oversized unicorn pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Her dark hair was a bird's nest of tangles. "Hey, Bug," Tom said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his tired eyes. He crouched down. How's the chest feel?" "A little tight," she squeaked. She coughed, a dry, rattling sound that made Tom's heart drop. "All right, warm water and oatmeal. Let's go." For the next 2 hours, Tom played the role. He was the invincible dad. He made breakfast, packed a lunch of half a turkey sandwich and an apple, and braided her hair. He walked her 3 blocks to the elementary school, holding her small hand. He didn't feel like a man who had saved a billionaire's life. He felt like a father trying to keep his kid breathing. When he finally got back to the apartment, it was 9 a.m. He had 6 hours to sleep before he had to wake up, pick Lily up, make dinner, and go back to the tower. He collapsed onto the unmade bed, barely managing to kick off his boots. He reached for his phone to set his alarm. There were 42 missed calls. Tom stared at the screen, his brow furrowed. Frank. Frank again. An unknown number. Frank. Another unknown number. He unlocked the phone. A text message from Frank sat at the top of his notifications. "Hodges, turn on Channel 5. Now." A cold spike of dread nailed Tom to the mattress. He grabbed the TV remote from the nightstand and clicked the power button. The morning news anchor, a perfectly coiffed woman with a serious expression, was speaking over a graphic that read, "Vanguard CEO in critical condition. Rushed to Northwestern Memorial early this morning," the anchor was saying. "Sources say Camille Kensington suffered a severe allergic reaction. But what is truly shocking the financial world this morning is the leaked security footage from her private office." The screen cut. It was black and white, grainy, high-angle footage from the security dome on the 50th floor. There was no audio. Tom felt the blood drain from his face. The video showed Camille collapsing. Then, a man in a gray jumpsuit, Tom, sliding to his knees next to her. But the angle was terrible. The desk obscured the EpiPen. The camera's perspective completely flattened the distance. It didn't look like CPR. It looked like Tom had grabbed her. It looked like he had forced his mouth onto hers. And then, the worst part, the moment the epinephrine kicked in. The footage showed Camille convulsing, arching her back, her hands desperately gripping Tom's collar, pulling his face down to hers. Without the context of her dying gasps, it looked like a desperate, violent embrace. The anchor's voice returned. "The identity of the man in the video is currently unknown. Vanguard Financial has declined to comment on the nature of Ms. Kensington's relationship with the employee, or if this alleged romantic encounter led to the medical emergency. Tabloids are already calling him the mystery lover." Tom dropped the remote. It clattered against the hardwood floor. "No," Tom whispered. "No, no, no." His phone buzzed in his hand. It was Frank again. This time, Tom answered it. "Frank, where are you?" Frank yelled over the phone. "Are you at home?" "Frank, the video, they took it out of context. She was dying." "Shut up, Hodges! Listen to me!" Frank's voice was strained, panicked. "Vanguard Security is tearing the building apart. The board of directors is going nuclear. They think you assaulted her, or that you're sleeping with her. The media is offering 10 grand to anyone who can ID the guy in the suit." Tom couldn't breathe. It felt like his own throat was closing up. "I saved her life," Well, the internet thinks you slipped her the tongue while she was choking to death. You need to lay low. Don't come in tonight. If HR gets your name. If I don't work, I don't get paid, Frank. I need the hours. You come here, there's going to be 50 cameras in your face and the cops waiting to arrest you for battery. Just stay put. The line went dead. Tom sat on the edge of the bed. The silence of the apartment pressed in on him. He looked at the empty bottle of albuterol sitting on the kitchen counter through the open doorway. He had saved a life, and it was going to ruin his own. Miles away, in a sterilized VIP room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, a heart monitor beeped in a steady, rhythmic cadence. Camille Kensington opened her eyes. Her throat felt like it was lined with broken glass. Her chest ached. She turned her head slowly, the IV lines pulling at her wrist. Her personal assistant, David, was standing at the foot of the bed, his face pale, clutching a tablet. "Ms. Kensington," David breathed, stepping forward. "Thank God! The doctor said you were minutes away from—" "Who?" Camille croaked. Her voice was a brutal, scraping whisper. David blinked. "Excuse me?" Camille closed her eyes, the memory flashing violently in her mind, the sheer terror of suffocating, the cold floor, and then the rough, calloused hands, the smell of cheap bleach and exhaustion. The man who had physically beaten the breath back into her lungs when she was fading into the dark. "Who was he?" she demanded, opening her eyes, the icy blue flashing with a sudden intense heat. David swallowed hard. He looked down at his tablet, then back up at her. "Ma'am, there's something you need to see. The media? They've got hold of the security footage." Camille didn't care about the media. She cared about debts. She owed her life to a ghost in a gray suit. And Camille Kensington always paid her debts. "Find him," she whispered. The IV line pulled tight against the back of Camille's hand. She looked at the clear tubing, then at the bruised skin beneath the medical tape, and ripped it out. A drop of blood welled up, bright and vivid against her pale skin. "Miss Kensington, please." David took a step forward, his hands raised like he was trying to calm a cornered animal. "The attending physician said you need fluids. Your histamine levels are still completely erratic." "My histamine levels aren't plunging our stock price, David," Camille said. Her voice was still a brutal, scraping whisper. Her throat felt raw, swollen, thick. She swung her legs over the edge of the hospital bed. Her bare feet hit the cold linoleum. "Show me the video again." David hesitated. He was 28, held a master's degree from Wharton, and was currently terrified of a woman in a backless cotton gown. He handed over the tablet. Camille watched the grainy black and white footage. She watched herself collapse. She watched the man in the gray jumpsuit slide into frame. She didn't see a lover. She saw violence. The desperate, mechanical violence of chest compressions. She watched him force air into her lungs. She remembered the sheer weight of him, the smell of industrial cleaner, the sheer terror that had gripped her right before the dark closed in. The media was calling it a passionate embrace. They were idiots. He was keeping her from turning into a corpse on her Persian rug. "The board convened an emergency session at 7 this morning," David said, his voice tight. "They're citing the morality clause in your contract. They're saying you were intoxicated, engaging in inappropriate relations with a subordinate, and that it triggered a medical episode. They want a vote of no confidence." Camille handed the tablet back. She didn't blink. "They've been waiting for an excuse to gut me since I fired Henderson last quarter. This is their leverage." "It's working," David said. "Vanguard is down 4% in pre-market trading. The tabloids are running wild. We need a statement. We need to deny it, fire the employee, and threaten legal action." Camille looked up. Her ice-blue eyes locked onto David, freezing him in place. "Fire him," she repeated. The whisper made it sound infinitely more dangerous. Yes, it's the standard crisis management protocol. We isolate the liability. That liability cracked 3 of my ribs, keeping my heart beating until the paramedics arrived, Camille said, standing up. The room spun for a fraction of a second. She grabbed the edge of the bed to steady herself. I was dead, David. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. He saved my life while security was busy checking IDs in the lobby. David swallowed. I understand that. But the optics? I don't care about the optics. I care about the fact that I owe him, and I don't leave debts unpaid. Camille walked to the small closet and pulled out the clothes David had brought her. Get HR on the phone. I want his name. I want his address. I want his employment file. HR is refusing to release the file to my office, David admitted, looking at the floor. They're citing the active board investigation. They've locked his credentials. Camille stopped. A cold, heavy silence filled the sterile hospital room. They locked him out, she said. Standard protocol. Camille pulled her silk blouse over her shoulders, wincing as the fabric brushed against the raw skin of her neck. Get me my head of security. Bypass HR. Call Griggs. Tell him to track the keycard swipes on the 50th floor from last night. I want a name in 10 minutes. Tom stood in the fluorescent glare of the neighborhood pharmacy. The hum of the coolers behind him sounded like a dentist's drill. Declined. The pharmacist, a tired-looking woman with thick glasses, slid the debit card back across the counter. She didn't make eye contact. They never did. Tom stared at the card. It was a piece of cheap blue plastic. It felt entirely useless. He looked at the paper bag on the counter. Inside was a generic albuterol inhaler, $85. Can you run it again? Tom asked. His voice sounded hollow. I ran it twice, sir. Insufficient funds. Tom closed his eyes. The headache that had been building since he woke up finally cracked open behind his temples. He had transferred his last $50 to the checking account, hoping a pending charge hadn't cleared. It had. He was overdrawn. He looked down at Lily. She was clinging to his pant leg, staring at the floor tiles. She gave a small, dry cough. The sound physically hurt him. Okay, Tom said quietly. He pushed the bag back toward the pharmacist. Never mind. Thank you. He took Lily's hand and walked out of the store. The Houston wind hit them immediately, biting through Tom's thin denim jacket. It was a bleak, overcast afternoon. I'm sorry, Dad, Lily mumbled, pulling her knit hat down over her ears. Tom stopped. He knelt on the concrete, ignoring the cold seeping through his jeans. He grabbed her shoulders gently. Hey, look at me. She looked up. Her eyes were wide, anxious. She knew the math didn't work. Kids always knew when the math didn't work. You don't apologize for breathing, Bug. You hear me? Never. Tom forced a smile. He smoothed her tangled hair. We'll get it tomorrow. I'll ask Frank for an advance. We have enough in the old inhaler to get through tonight. It was a lie. The old inhaler was sputtering, but he needed her to stop looking so terrified. They walked the remaining 4 blocks to their apartment building. The neighborhood was a patchwork of crumbling brick facades and overgrown lots. The lobby smelled like boiled cabbage and damp dog. Tom checked his phone as they walked up the 3 flights of stairs. Frank hadn't texted back. Tom had tried to call Vanguard HR twice. Both times he was transferred to a generic voicemail. He was locked out of the employee portal. He didn't exist anymore. The system had swallowed him whole and spat out the bones. He unlocked the apartment door, ushered Lily inside, and locked the deadbolt behind them. Go wash your hands, Tom said, stripping off his jacket. I'll make some pasta. He walked into the tiny kitchen. He opened the fridge. Half a carton of milk, a jar of cheap mustard, and a brick of cheddar cheese. He closed it. He leaned his forehead against the cool, dented metal of the door. He had nothing left to sell. He had pawned his late wife's wedding band 3 years ago to pay for Lily's hospital stay when the asthma first manifested. He drove a car with a cracked engine block. He scrubbed toilets for a company that had just erased him to save face. A sharp knock on the front door made him jump. Tom froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. Cops, he thought. Frank said they were looking for me. They think I assaulted her. He moved silently down the narrow hallway. Lily peeked her head out of the bathroom. Tom held a finger to his lips. He pressed his eye against the peephole. It wasn't the police. Standing in the dim, flickering light of the hallway was a woman. She was wearing a tailored charcoal overcoat. Her dark hair was pulled back sharply. Even through the distorted glass of the peephole, Tom recognized the icy, uncompromising eyes. Camille Kensington. Tom didn't move. He held his breath. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't a frantic knock. It was measured, deliberate. The knock of someone who owned the door and the building it was attached to. "I know you're in there, Mr. Hodges," a voice called out. It was raspy, strained, completely devoid of the usual corporate polish. "My security team tracked your license plate. Open the door." Tom unfastened the deadbolt. He turned the knob and pulled the door open just enough to block the entryway with his body. Camille stood there. Up close, the damage was obvious. A dark, ugly bruise was blooming along her jawline. Her neck was red and irritated. She looked exhausted, pale, and entirely out of place in a hallway that smelled of garbage and old fry grease. Behind her, down at the end of the hall, a massive man in a black suit stood with his hands folded in front of him. "You shouldn't be here," Tom said. His voice was flat, protective. "And you shouldn't be dodging my phone calls," Camille replied. She didn't flinch at his tone. She met his eyes, unblinking. "I don't have your number, and Vanguard locked me out of the system." Tom tightened his grip on the door. "Look, lady, I didn't say a word to the press. I didn't touch you inappropriately. You were dying. I did my job. Now please, go away before you make this worse." "It's already worse," Camille said. She leaned heavily against the doorframe. For a second, the iron facade cracked, revealing the physical toll of a near-death experience. She winced, pressing a hand to her ribs. "May I come in?" "No." Camille looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw the exhaustion etched into his face, the faded, threadbare flannel shirt, the defensive posture of a man who was used to being kicked. "I have a board of directors trying to use a grainy video of you breaking my ribs to steal my company," Camille said, her voice dropping lower, forcing him to listen. "You have no job, no severance, and from the look of this building, no financial safety net. We have a mutual problem." "My problem," Tom said, his jaw tightening, "is that I can't afford my daughter's medication because your HR department fired me to cover your ass. So don't talk to me about mutual problems." A dry, rattling cough echoed from the living room. Camille's eyes shifted over Tom's shoulder. "Dad?" Lily's voice called out nervously. Tom felt a spike of absolute panic. He shifted, blocking Camille's view completely. I said, "Go away." Camille didn't move. She stared at Tom's chest for a long moment, calculating. The air in the hallway felt heavy. Then, she reached into the pocket of her overcoat. Tom tensed, ready to shut the door in her face. She pulled out a sleek, rectangular object and held it out. It was a brand new albuterol inhaler. Boxed. Unopened. Tom stared at it. The breath caught in his throat. "My assistant picked it up on the way here," Camille said quietly. "He called your pharmacy. They told him your card declined. Take it." Tom felt a flush of deep, burning humiliation rise in his cheeks. He hated her in that moment. He hated that she knew. He hated that she had the power to solve his most desperate problem with casual pocket change. "I don't take charity," Tom said softly. "It's not charity," Camille rasped. "It's an operational expense. You kept me breathing. I'm returning the favor. Take it, Hodges, before I drop it on this filthy floor." Tom looked at the box. He heard Lily cough again. Pride didn't pay the bills. Pride didn't clear the lungs. He snatched the box from her hand. 5 minutes, he muttered, stepping back and pulling the door open. Camille walked in. She didn't look disgusted by the cramped apartment. She didn't look at the peeling wallpaper or the worn-out rug. She looked at the reality of the situation with the cold, assessing gaze of an auditor. "Go give her that," Camille said, nodding toward the hallway. "I'll wait." Tom walked to the living room, unwrapping the box. He administered the dose to Lily, watching the tight lines of panic ease around her small eyes as the medicine opened her airways. He tucked her onto the sofa with a blanket and turned on a cartoon to drown out the noise. When he walked back into the tiny kitchen, Camille was sitting at the wobbly laminate table. She looked exhausted. "All right," Tom said, leaning against the counter, crossing his arms. "You're inside. You gave me the medicine. What do you want?" Camille folded her hands on the table. "I want to buy your life for the next 6 months." Tom laughed. It was a harsh, humorless sound. "My life isn't worth much. Right now, your life is worth roughly $400 million in market capitalization," Camille said, entirely serious. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. "The board of Vanguard Financial is trying to declare me mentally unfit and morally compromised. They leaked the security footage to force a public scandal. So tell them the truth. You had an allergic reaction. I gave you CPR. Truth is irrelevant in corporate warfare," Camille stated flatly. "The video is out. The narrative is set. They are painting me as an erratic, lonely executive engaging in a sordid affair with a nighttime cleaner. It plays perfectly into the misogynistic angle they've been building for years. If I try to claim it was just a medical emergency, they'll say I'm covering up an assault. Or worse, that my health is failing, which triggers a medical succession clause." Tom rubbed his eyes. The sheer scale of her world was giving him a headache. "And how does buying my life fix that?" Camille leaned forward. The bruise on her jaw caught the harsh light of the kitchen bulb. "We lean into the skid." Tom stopped rubbing his eyes. He looked at her. "What?" "The media loves a fairy tale, Hodges. They want a romance, a passionate, secret affair between the ruthless CEO and the humble, hard-working single father." She said the words with a clinical detachment that made Tom shudder. "We don't deny this video. We contextualize it. We go public. We tell them we've been seeing each other quietly. You were visiting my office. I had a minor reaction to something I ate. You administered the EpiPen, and the footage they saw was a moment of panic and relief. You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend?" Tom stared at her, dumbfounded. "Are you insane?" "I am pragmatic." Camille sat back. "If we are a united front, a genuine couple, the morality clause evaporates. It's no longer a scandal. It's a modern romance. The board loses their leverage. The shareholders eat it up. The stock stabilizes." "I am a janitor," Tom said slowly, pointing at his own chest. "You are a billionaire. Nobody is going to believe that. People believe what they want to believe. You're conventionally attractive. You have a tragic backstory. You saved my life." Camille ticked the points off on her fingers. "The PR department can polish you up in an afternoon." "No," Tom pushed off the counter. "Absolutely not. I want my job back. I want back pay for the shifts I missed, and I want to be left alone." "Your job is gone," Camille said coldly. "Even if I force HR to reinstate you, the press will camp outside this building forever. They will follow your daughter to school. They will dig into your late wife's medical debt. They will ruin your life to get a headline. Tom froze. His hands balled into fists. Don't bring my family into this. They are already in it! Camille's voice rose, a sudden sharp crack of thunder in the small kitchen. She winced, touching her throat, and lowered her voice back to a raspy whisper. You think you can hide from this? You are the mystery lover on every news channel in the country. By tomorrow, someone will ID you. When they do, the media circus will rip this door off its hinges. She stood up. She walked slowly toward him. Despite being 6 inches shorter, she projected a tidal wave of pressure. I am offering you a shield, Camille said, stopping 2 feet away from him. You sign an NDA. You sign a contract for 6 months of public appearances as my partner. You move out of this place. You and your daughter relocate to my penthouse. It's highly secure. No press. Private tutors for her. Tom's chest tightened. He looked away, staring at the peeling paint on the cabinets. And compensation, Camille added quietly. I don't want your money. Yes, you do. You're just too proud to admit it. Camille reached into her coat again. She pulled out a folded piece of heavy stock paper and placed it on the kitchen counter next to Tom's hand. That is a cashier's check, Camille said, for $250,000. It is the signing bonus. If you complete the 6 months, you get another $500,000. Tax-free. Paid through a shell consulting firm. Tom stared at the piece of paper. He didn't touch it. It felt like a trap. It felt like selling his soul. $750,000. It was a number so large it didn't compute. It was rent for the rest of his life. It was top-tier medical insurance for Lily. It was college tuition. It was a house with a yard. It was an escape from the crushing, suffocating weight of poverty that sat on his chest every single morning. Why? Tom asked, his voice cracking. He finally looked back at her. Why me? You could hire an actor. You could hire a model. Because the board has the security logs, Camille replied, her blue eyes softening just a fraction. They know it was you in that room. It has to be you. She paused, and for the first time, the corporate armor dropped entirely. The CEO vanished, and Tom saw the woman who had been dying on the Persian rug. And because, Camille whispered, I owe you my life. I can't give you back your anonymity. That was destroyed the second that video leaked. But I can give you a future. I can make sure you never have to choose between groceries and your daughter's ability to breathe ever again. A heavy silence settled over the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. From the living room, the muffled sound of a cartoon played brightly. Tom looked at the check. He looked at the empty fridge. He looked at his hands, covered in the tiny white scars from years of industrial bleach. He had spent his whole life trying to be invisible, trying to survive the grind. He had pushed a mop in the shadows while people like Camille Kensington ruled the world from the sky. Now the sky was falling, and she was asking him to catch it. 6 months, Tom said, his voice barely audible. 6 months, Camille confirmed. Strictly professional. We do the interviews. We smile for the cameras. We kill the board's narrative. Then we break up amicably. You take the money and disappear. Tom closed his eyes. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He reached out and placed his hand flat over the folded check. What's the first step? Tom asked. Camille's posture straightened. The moment of vulnerability vanished, instantly replaced by the terrifying efficiency of Vanguard's CEO. Pack your bags, Camille said, pulling a sleek phone from her pocket and dialing a number. We're going shopping. You can't meet the press looking like a casualty. The elevator doors opened with a soft, melodic chime, revealing the penthouse. Tom stepped out, holding Lily's hand so tightly his knuckles were white. He had spent 3 years cleaning the most expensive real estate in Houston, but this was entirely different. Vanguard's offices were designed to intimidate. Camille Kensington's home was designed to insulate. It was a sprawling, multi-level fortress of glass, steel, and warm, dark wood. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of the city, placing them above the clouds. There was no sound. The roar of the Houston traffic, the sirens, the constant grinding hum of the city that Tom had lived with his entire life. It was all completely erased. "Wow," Lily whispered. She let go of his hand, her small sneakers squeaking softly against the polished Brazilian hardwood as she walked toward the glass. "Dad, we're flying." Tom swallowed hard. He didn't feel like he was flying. He felt like he was suffocating in an entirely new way. "David will show Lily to her room," Camille said, stepping off the elevator behind them. She had traded her ruined blazer for a simple, impeccably cut black turtleneck, but the dark bruise on her jaw remained a stark reminder of the night before. "The tutors arrive tomorrow at 9. For now, she can rest." David, looking entirely out of his element holding Lily's battered pink backpack, managed a stiff smile. "Right this way, kiddo. We have, television. And a chef." Lily looked back at Tom, her eyes wide with uncertainty. Tom forced a reassuring nod. "Go ahead, Bug. I'm right here." Once David and Lily disappeared down a long, art-lined hallway, the crushing silence returned. Tom stood in the center of the massive living room, wearing his faded flannel and scuffed boots. He felt like a stain on a white rug. "Sit," Camille said, gesturing toward a massive leather sectional. "I prefer to stand." Camille didn't argue. She walked to a wet bar tucked into the corner, poured an inch of amber liquid into 2 crystal tumblers, and walked back, offering one to him. Tom took it. It was Macallan. The good stuff. It smelled like peat and money. "The tailor is coming in an hour," Camille said, taking a slow sip of her drink. "Tomorrow my publicist will brief you. By tomorrow night we attend the Vanguard Foundation Gala. It's our annual charity dinner. The entire board of directors will be there, along with the city's major press outlets." Tom stared into his glass. "We're just jumping right into the deep end, huh?" "The board is voting on my competency on Friday," Camille stated plainly. "We don't have time to wade. We need a show of force. They are expecting a panicked, erratic CEO. Instead, they are going to get a unified front." "They're going to get a janitor in a rented suit," Tom corrected, looking up. "Look, I signed your contract. I took your check. I'll play the part. But these are your people. Sharks. They smell blood in the water. They're going to tear me apart to get to you." Camille set her glass down. The sharp clink echoed in the quiet room. She walked toward him, stopping a foot away. She looked up, her ice-blue eyes locking onto his. "They are not my people," Camille said softly. "They are my employees. And they are trying to steal my father's legacy. As for you..." She reached out, her cool fingers lightly touching the collar of his worn flannel shirt. Tom stiffened, but he didn't pull away. "You aren't a janitor anymore, Tom," she said. "You are my partner. You don't have to understand hedge funds or corporate acquisitions. You just have to stand next to me and look like you belong there. Can you do that?" Tom looked at the bruise on her jaw. He remembered the desperate, terrifying strength in her hands when she had fought for air on the floor of the 50th level. She was a billionaire, a titan of industry, but beneath it all, she was just a person who wanted to survive. He understood survival. It was the only language he was fluent in. "I can stand," Tom said roughly. The next 3 hours were a blur of humiliating, precise invasions of personal space. A team of 3 people swarmed the penthouse. A barber sat Tom in a chair in one of the guest bathrooms, wrapping a hot towel around his face before scraping away 3 days of rough stubble with a straight razor. They trimmed his hair, tightening the edges, washing away the smell of cheap soap and replacing it with something that smelled faintly of cedar and bergamot. Then came the tailor. an older Italian man who spoke in rapid, hushed tones while poking Tom with pins. Tom stood perfectly still in front of a full-length mirror as a bespoke charcoal tuxedo was practically built around his shoulders. When it was over, the team packed up and vanished as quickly as they had arrived. Tom was left alone in the guest bedroom. He turned to the mirror. He didn't recognize the man staring back. The heavy bags under his eyes were still there, but they no longer looked like exhaustion. They looked like a quiet, dangerous intensity. The charcoal suit fit him flawlessly, broadening his shoulders, tapering at his waist. He didn't look like a guy who checked his bank account before buying a gallon of milk. He looked like money. Old, quiet, dangerous money. The bedroom door clicked open. Camille stood in the doorway. She was wearing a floor-length emerald green gown that left her shoulders bare. Her dark hair was swept up, and diamond drops hung from her ears. But the makeup artists hadn't completely hidden the bruise on her jaw. It was a deliberate choice, a battle scar worn proudly. She stopped, her eyes sweeping over Tom. For the first time since they had met, the cold, calculating CEO faltered. She blinked, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing her face. "Well," Camille murmured, the rasp in her voice catching slightly. "The Italian didn't disappoint?" Tom adjusted the cuffs of the crisp white shirt. It felt like armor. Heavy, unfamiliar armor. "It feels like a costume." "It is," Camille said, walking into the room. "But so is this." She gestured to her own gown. "Everything is a performance, Tom. The only difference tonight is that the audience has cameras. Are you ready?" Tom thought about Lily, asleep in a bed the size of their old living room, an unopened, brand-new inhaler sitting on the nightstand beside her. He squared his shoulders. "Let's go to work." The Vanguard Foundation Gala was held at the Field Museum. The massive marble hall, usually reserved for dinosaur fossils and echoing school field trips, had been transformed. Thousands of white orchids spilled over tables draped in black silk. The lighting was low and dramatic, illuminating the city's elite as they mingled, drank champagne, and whispered behind each other's backs. Outside, a barricade held back a thrashing ocean of paparazzi. Flashbulbs strobed like a lightning storm. When the black-armored SUV pulled up to the red carpet, the shouting became a physical wall of noise. "Camille! Camille, over here! Who is the mystery man? Is it true you were attacked?" Inside the SUV, Camille looked at Tom. Her hands, resting in her lap, were trembling just a fraction. It was the only sign of weakness. "Don't look at the cameras," she instructed, her voice tight. "Look at me or look straight ahead. Do not answer questions. Just keep walking." Tom reached out. He didn't think about it. It was instinct. He placed his large, calloused hand over hers, completely engulfing it. Her skin was freezing. "I've got you," Tom said quietly. Camille looked at his hand, then up into his eyes. The panic in her chest, the residual terror from the anaphylaxis that had been threatening to drown her all day, suddenly leveled out. He was an anchor, heavy, real. The door opened. Tom stepped out first. The flashbulbs were blinding, an immediate, violent assault on his senses. He ignored them. He turned, offering his hand to Camille. She took it, stepping out onto the red carpet in a flash of emerald green. The crowd went wild. Tom slid his arm around her waist. It was part of the contract, part of the act, but the moment his hand settled against the silk of her gown, it felt violently real. He kept his posture rigid, his face a mask of absolute calm, shielding her body with his own as they walked the gauntlet. They made it inside, trading the screaming press for the hushed, predatory stares of the Vanguard elite. Every head in the room turned. The whispers were immediate, a collective, hissing intake of breath. "Showtime," Camille murmured under her breath, pasting on a flawless, razor-sharp smile. They hadn't taken 10 steps into the grand hall before the crowd parted, revealing a tall, silver-haired man in a stark black tuxedo. He held a glass of gin, his eyes crinkling in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Richard Gallagher, chairman of the board. The man who had leaked the tape. "Camille, darling," Richard purred, stepping forward. He didn't offer to kiss her cheek. He was staring directly at Tom. "We were so worried. When the footage leaked, well, we feared the worst. It's a miracle you're standing here." "I'm perfectly fine, Richard. Thank you for your concern," Camille said, her voice dripping with absolute ice. "Though I'm sure my survival was a disappointment to some," Richard chuckled, a low, patronizing sound. "Always the fighter. And this must be the savior." He turned his full attention to Tom, his eyes dropping to the custom suit, calculating the cost, and then darting back up. "I don't believe we've been introduced. I know everyone in Camille's circle. You are?" "Tom," he said. He didn't offer his last name. He didn't extend his hand. "Tom," Richard repeated, tasting the common name with obvious distaste. "Fascinating. The press has been digging for days, and yet you have no footprint, no hedge fund, no tech startup. Tell me, Tom, what exactly is your portfolio?" It was a trap. A blatant, public challenge. Several other board members had drifted closer, holding their champagne flutes, waiting for the blood to hit the water. They expected the working-class guy to stumble, to admit he scrubbed their toilets, to shatter the illusion. Camille stiffened. She opened her mouth to intervene, but Tom squeezed her waist gently, silencing her. Tom looked at Richard. He didn't see a titan of industry. He saw the man whose corner office on the 48th floor he had cleaned every Tuesday. He saw the empty bottles of cheap vodka hidden in the bottom drawer of the mahogany desk. He saw the shredded divorce papers and the frantic, red-inked margins of failing quarterly reports. Tom stepped forward, closing the distance between them. He was 2 inches taller than Richard and 100 pounds heavier. The sheer physical presence of a man who worked with his hands backed the chairman up half a step. "My portfolio, Richard, is keeping things clean," Tom said. His voice was low, gravelly, and carried effortlessly over the classical quartet playing in the background. "When a mess is made, I step in and fix it. Usually quietly. Usually before people even realize how deep in the garbage they actually are." The color drained from Richard's face. "For instance," Tom continued, his eyes locking onto Richard's with a dead, unblinking stare. "I know that when things get stressful, people leave evidence of their failures in their wastebaskets. Financial drafts, misplaced funds, the kind of trash that ruins careers if it isn't properly disposed of." Silence dropped over the immediate circle of executives, like a lead weight. Tom wasn't talking about the stock market. He was talking about Richard's actual physical trash. But to the board, it sounded like a blatant threat from a corporate fixer. It sounded like Tom had dirt on every single one of them. "Camille handles the future of Vanguard," Tom said, stepping back, slipping his arm seamlessly around Camille's waist once again. "I handle the liabilities. So, if anyone has an issue with her leadership or questions about our relationship, you can bring it to me, and we can review the trash." Richard swallowed thickly. He looked at Tom, then at Camille. The patronizing smirk was completely gone, replaced by a deep, unsettled paranoia. "Enjoy the gala, Richard," Camille said smoothly. She turned, guiding Tom away from the chairman and into the crowd. They walked in silence for a few moments, moving toward a secluded balcony overlooking the museum's dinosaur exhibits. The moment they were out of earshot, Camille let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for 5 years. She turned to Tom. Her ice-blue eyes were wide, practically glowing in the dim light. "What?" she breathed. Was that? He drinks cheap vodka out of a flask and throws the empties in the recycle bin, Tom said flatly. And last month he shredded a document from the SEC, but the machine jammed. I had to pull it out by hand. I know how to read. A sound escaped Camille's lips. It was a laugh. A real, genuine, startlingly bright laugh that stripped away the terrifying CEO and left behind a woman who was utterly delighted. You threatened the chairman of the board with his own garbage, she said, shaking her head. He thinks you're a private investigator, or an assassin. I told him the truth. I clean up messes. Camille stopped laughing. The smile faded into something softer, something incredibly vulnerable. She looked up at him, the noise of the gala fading into the background. You didn't flinch, she said quietly. Everyone flinches when Richard pushes them. You didn't even blink. I've dealt with worse than rich men in suits, Camille. She reached out. This time she didn't touch his clothes. She pressed her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. It was beating steadily, calmly. Thank you, she whispered. It wasn't for the gala. It was for the 50th floor. It was for the breath in her lungs. Tom looked down at her. The line between the contract and reality suddenly felt dangerously thin. You're welcome. The adrenaline crash hit them both the moment the penthouse doors closed behind them. It was 2:00 a.m. The city below was a sprawling grid of quiet, amber lights. Tom pulled the bow tie loose, letting it hang around his neck. He shrugged off the heavy charcoal jacket and dropped it over the back of a leather chair. I'm going to check on Lily, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. He walked down the quiet hallway, pushing the heavy oak door open an inch. A small nightlight cast a warm, yellow glow over the massive bed. Lily was fast asleep, buried under a mountain of down comforters. Her breathing was slow, even, and entirely silent. No rattle, no wheeze. Tom stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching her chest rise and fall. When he finally walked back into the living room, Camille was sitting on the floor by the floor-to-ceiling windows. She had kicked off her heels and pulled the emerald gown up around her knees. She held a glass of water, staring out at the Houston skyline. She looked small. Stripped of the armor, stripped of the boardrooms and the press, she was just a woman sitting in a glass box in the sky. Tom walked over and sat down on the hardwood floor next to her. He stretched his long legs out, crossing them at the ankles. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The PR team just sent the morning headlines, Camille finally said. Her voice was back to the raspy whisper, worn out from the night. She didn't look at him. They're calling you the Vanguard Enforcer. The tabloids are saying we've been secretly engaged for a year. The stock is up 6% in after-hours trading. Mission accomplished, Tom said. His voice sounded hollow. Camille turned her head. She studied his profile. The strong jaw, the faint scar above his eyebrow, the permanent exhaustion that the expensive suit couldn't quite hide. Is she okay? Camille asked softly. Lily. Tom glanced at her, surprised. She's sleeping, breathing easy. The new medicine works. Camille nodded slowly. She looked down at her glass of water. I know what it feels like, she said, the words barely audible. Not being able to pull the air in, feeling your chest lock up, knowing that your body is betraying you, and there is absolutely nothing you can do to stop it. Tom looked at her. He remembered the sheer panic in her blue eyes on the floor of her office. He remembered the terrifying whistling sound of her closing throat. It's like being buried alive, Camille whispered. Yeah, Tom said quietly. It is. I watched my father build this company, Camille continued, leaning her head back against the cool glass of the window. He was ruthless. He taught me that everyone is a transaction. Everyone wants something. You find out what it is, you pay for it, and you own them. She closed her eyes. But you can't buy oxygen. You can't bribe your own lungs. When I was on the floor, all the money, all the power, it was completely useless. I was just a dying animal. She opened her eyes and looked at him. The sheer intensity of her gaze made Tom's breath catch in his throat. And then you were there, she said. You didn't care who I was. You didn't ask for a contract. You just broke my ribs and forced me to live. It's what anyone would have done, Tom deflected, looking away. No, it isn't, Camille said fiercely. Richard would have watched me die. David would have fainted. You saved me, Tom. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers traced the rough, dry cracks on his knuckles. The scars of 3 years of industrial bleach and brutal labor. This contract, Camille said, her voice trembling slightly. The 6 months, the money. I told you it was an operational expense, to protect the company. I know. It was a lie. Tom froze. He turned his head slowly, meeting her gaze. What? I don't care about the board, Camille admitted, a tear finally breaking loose and tracing a slow path down her bruised cheek. I could have fought them in court. I could have crushed Richard without the PR stunt. She tightened her grip on his hand. I couldn't let you walk out of my life. I couldn't let you go back to scrubbing floors and terrified that your daughter wasn't going to wake up. I needed a reason to keep you here. The silence that followed was deafening. Tom stared at her. The billionaire CEO, the ruthless visionary. She was terrified. She had built a fortress of money and power, and she was entirely alone inside it. Until a ghost with a mop bucket had broken the walls down. Tom looked at her hand wrapped around his. He thought about the tiny, crumbling apartment in Rogers Park. He thought about the constant, grinding fear that had lived in his chest for 3 years. He didn't want to go back. Not just for Lily. For himself. He unlaced his fingers from hers, and for a split second, a flash of pure devastation crossed Camille's face. She thought he was pulling away. She thought the transaction was over. Instead, Tom lifted his hand and gently wiped the tear from her cheek with his thumb. His rough, calloused skin was a stark contrast to the soft silk of her face. 6 months is a long time, Camille, Tom said, his voice dropping to a low, steady rumble. Camille's breath hitched. Is it? It's long enough to figure out if this is just a trauma bond, Tom said, a faint, genuine smile touching the corners of his mouth. Or if you actually like guys who buy their flannels at a thrift store. Camille let out a shuddering breath, a watery laugh escaping her lips. She leaned into his hand, her eyes fluttering shut. I think the tailor fixed the flannel problem, he tried. Tom shifted, moving closer to her. The massive, cold penthouse suddenly felt entirely different. It didn't feel like a glass cage anymore. It felt warm. It felt like breathing. Tom? Camille whispered, opening her eyes. The ice in them had completely melted. Yeah? Don't disappear on me. Tom leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. He didn't taste copper or stale coffee or blind panic anymore. He just felt the steady, even rhythm of a heart he had kept beating. I'm right here, Tom said. I'm not going anywhere. Sometimes the biggest rescues don't happen in a hospital room. They happen in the quiet moments after the chaos, when 2 people realize they no longer have to survive alone. Tom and Camille's journey proves that the lines dividing our worlds are only as strong as we allow them to be. If this story of grit, survival, and unexpected connection hit home for you, please hit that like button to support the channel. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that second chances exist, and subscribe so you never miss another deeply human, grounded story.